Welcome to the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. The following presentation, AI for Good, took place on December the 9th, 2024. Presentations were made by Wintemute and Stephen Nichols of Aimee Says, Matt Hron and Matt Morrissette of Wildlife Protection Solutions, and Adrian Chernoff of Ojje. Chapter markers are provided below in the description field for you to navigate to each of these presentations. Also, a big thanks to Phil Nugent, who emceed the event. Phil is founder and editor-in-chief of Colorado AI News.
First two speakers, Wintemute and Stephen Nichols, are the co-founders of the Denver-based startup Aimee Says. They are on a mission to support the millions of people who are affected by domestic abuse every year, and their innovative AI-driven app serves as a companion, helping victims process their experiences, seek safety, and prepare for legal proceedings. In less than a year, Aimee Says has grown to support tens of thousands of victims across 95 countries. Think about that, yeah. That's AI for good, man. That's AI for good right there. A little bit more. Ann and Stephen will discuss, I'm putting you guys on the spot. Ann and Stephen will discuss the unique technology challenges posed by their user population, the critical need to provide unwavering support to these users, and their ambitious vision for the future. AI represents a revolutionary breakthrough in supporting domestic violence victims, and Ann and Stephen will explore how Aimee Says leverages this transformative technology to make a profound difference in the world. Please welcome Ann and Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you all. We are really honored to be here tonight. Thank you so much for having us, Phil. Thanks so much for inviting us. Our presentation comes with a trigger warning. Many of the people in this room will have experienced some form of harmful relationship in their life, or they love someone who has been through that, or they might have been a child in a home where domestic violence was present. So I just honor that and take care of yourself as you need. There are a lot of myths and stigmas around domestic violence. I'm going to give a super easy primer and overview. There are a lot of terms used interchangeably with domestic violence: intimate partner violence, coercive control. Some people say narcissistic abuse, domestic violence, domestic abuse. All of them are a pattern, an intentional pattern of behaviors that are meant to induce dominance over the other person in the relationship. It can look different in a variety of relationships. For example, some abusers find physical violence especially distasteful, so they don't ever use it, but they are especially good at, for example, psychological violence. So it can take many forms, and it's important to recognize that. It's also very important to recognize that it affects everyone. There is no one who is safe from potentially being victimized by domestic violence. No socioeconomic status, no level of education, no level of economic resource is singularly protective. But most importantly, in the context of our conversation tonight, the impacts of domestic violence on survivors are extreme. It's not just the immediate impacts, especially of physical violence, for example, but it's the long-lasting impacts. The number one predictor about whether or not someone will make a reasonable recovery is the access to resources they have. Those kinds of resources are going to prevent especially some of the long-term effects, like the increased rates of anxiety, depression, suicidality, PTSD, etc. So that's kind of the backdrop, where somebody now has to go out and get the support that they need in order to recognize the abuse that's present in their relationship or decide how they want to respond to it, and then ultimately, hopefully, to recover from it. And the landscape of that today is incredibly challenging. There are resources like websites that people can go to. You can call the domestic violence hotline. It's about a 49% answer rate to that phone call. They might talk to a lawyer who tells them one thing, and a therapist who tells them another thing, and friends who maybe tell them things that are definitely not true, like you should stay in the relationship, stay committed to that. And it's incredibly challenging for victims to kind of pool together the necessary resources to make the next steps that are going to be most protective for them. And it's the problem isn't that we haven't thrown enough money at it. Someone can throw all sorts of money at their issue with domestic violence or any form of abuse and not get the outcomes that they need. It's estimated that the lifetime economic burden of domestic violence in the United States is $3.6 trillion. So a third of that is being borne by the local, state, and federal governments. A third of that is being borne by the survivors themselves. That's therapy, that's lost work, that's legal fees. And the other third is essentially borne by the employers who are employing the domestic violence victims. We thought there was a problem with this.
Yeah.
And that was what brought Stephen and I together to figure out if maybe AI could help bring the scope and scale of resources down to one point.
It is, yeah. We had a conversation, a cup of coffee, a little over a year ago, where I don't have a background in domestic violence at all. So as Anna's talking through all of this, I'm kind of overwhelmed with all of the feelings that come when you first see it for the first time. And then in researching it later, we found out that over 10 million people a year in the US alone, according to the NIH, go through some kind of form of domestic violence. So it's a huge population. And what's interesting about this, as you were mentioning, is there aren't a whole lot of really great solutions. There are really expensive solutions that are okay, and there are free solutions that are not incredibly amazing. And so it's kind of this interesting area that we can step into and have a big impact. So we had a story a second ago about a typical victim of domestic violence who might suffer this for decades, right? Someone named Julie who shares kids with her abuser could have to deal with this abuser for decades and really struggle. And that's a story that's all too common. Probably people in this room are going through some form of that right now.
Yes, and I was some Colorado statistics. So I was just sitting in on a domestic violence fatality review for the state of Colorado, which is a heavy subject. It was a small room of people who really wanted to sit there through that. And what really stood out to me that there were 58 domestic violence fatalities in Colorado last year. How many of them do you think were a protected party on a protection order? Anybody with any ideas out of 58 people? All of them? I hear all of them. One of the fatalities was a protected party on a temporary or permanent protection order. How many of those victims, the deceased victims, had approached, interacted with, engaged with a victim service organization in Colorado? I see 5 fingers, 4. You guys are really close. So these systems are in place. They're incredibly expensive to operate. They're overwhelmed with need. There are 57 people who died last year who were not a protected party on a protection order. People struggle to engage the existing services that are there for a variety of reasons. It's a lot of clicks. It's a lot of clicks to get through online. It's a lot of phone calls to make. It's a lot of phones that just ring and ring and ring. And we couldn't tolerate that anymore.
Yeah. So we're an impact business. We're looking to change exactly that. So like I was saying, we're having a cup of coffee a little over a year ago. And at the time, I had been doing a lot of management consulting as an independent consultant and had started playing with AI. And I think like probably everyone in the room had that kind of floor drop out from underneath you moment with ChatGPT, where it's like, oh my God, how is this a real thing that really works? And it's just amazing. So I was having a conversation with Anne, and Anne was throwing these statistics on me. And I was like, wow, this is really dark, and this is really tough to look through. And then I pulled out my phone and started ChatGPT around domestic violence. And we found out that it actually was pretty knowledgeable. It was able to give advice that came back that was trauma-informed. It wasn't going to re-traumatize someone who went through it. And so we were both excited. To Anne's credit, she didn't look at this and say, well, this takes my job because you're working as a consultant helping people who are going through it. Instead, Anne's reaction was, well, how can I use this to, instead of helping a dozen people, help 100 times that or 1,000 times that? And that's kind of what we've been building out. So we came away from that, and I spent that evening building a really basic Flask application using the OpenAI API, embarrassingly basic, and sent it over to Anne. And Anne, without my permission, put it on Facebook And we had a huge response. People were really excited about what it's able to do. The killer feature was it could take a message from a former spouse who was abusive. You share custody with these kids, or share kids with the guys. And it could go through and analyze it and say, well, this is why it's abusive. And this is how you reply. And like, that sounds pretty normal now because it's, 2024. We've been used to it for a year. But at the time, it was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, I don't have to actually read the thing any longer. So I built this out. We showed it to him. And a producer at 9 News found that and said, we want to run a story on it. And Ann said, great news. We want to run a story. 9 News wants to run a story on us. And I said, cool. When are we going to shoot? She goes, in 3 days. And I say, okay. So I spent the next weekend building out the first proof of concept, I guess, using really cutting edge technology like CSS for styling, because the first one didn't have any to it at all. And got a prototype launched, ran the story, huge response for the proof of concept. So we thought, well, we have something here. So hired a developer who became a close friend of ours and put together a product and got that launched, February or so this year. And since then, it's been just so much fun to watch traffic and users and all the numbers go the right direction. And
fun in a bad way, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a little bit of that, right? Like you're really sorry this market exists, but it does exist, obviously, and we've kind of hit a nerve for it. So we've got to see how users interact with our tool. We've got to understand what their use cases are. We've got to be able to adjust our product and make sure we're being responsive to what their needs are. And it's just been quite a journey over the past 9-10 months.
Yeah, so we took what we learned really early on in my experience. So prior, I was working as a strategic consultant for people who were experiencing post-separation abuse. So it meant they ended their relationship, they had shared children, they thought the abuse was going to end. Turns out that's also a myth. That doesn't really happen. The family court system becomes the next home where the abuse continues. So I was working directly with that population. So we took all the things that we learned from this little beta app that I think was really awesome, and I think he undersells himself, and all of my experience. And we thought, okay, we need to try to bring all of these resources to a single nexus. So someone can have one conversation. And instead of having 11 conversations with 11 people with 11 different opinions, myths, biases, expertises, whatever, we could really refine that down so that people would have an easier time accessing the resources and get the kind of companionable support that we know really assists with long-term outcomes. We also knew this was a really vulnerable population. So their data security was very important. Figuring out how to make sure that people could immediately escape the site with no trace, how to make it possible to build a subscription service where data is collected, but to maintain a free service where nothing is ever traceable and things disappear, because we certainly didn't want abusers getting a hold of information from their victims. I hit the space bar and that's what does it.
It is.
Magic. Okay.
I'm the technology guy.
Yeah. I just go, ooh, that's so cool. So this is this simple interface, and we want to make sure it's very quiet is important. Often the users are triggered. They have PTSD. They have limited executive functioning. But we built out something that could help them recognize early on, right? You had 4 weird Tinder dates. He sent you some messages that made you kind of feel uncomfortable. You can talk to Aimee. Aimee will help you understand why those messages made you feel uncomfortable. All the abuse recognition from super early like that, well through the process. Safety planning, really important. Leaving and post-separation are actually the least safe times for the victim survivor. Legal empowerment. The legal system exists for a reason. Victims are least able to access it. They are the least financially capable, typically in a relationship. They're also the most traumatized. And the adversarial legal system advantages people who are adversarial. So it's an unfortunate battleground. So a whole lot of legal empowerment to try to elevate kind of the floor of the victim's legal experience in order to hopefully achieve positive outcomes. And then co-parenting support, like Julie experienced. If you're co-parenting with a person who is abusive in your relationship, you're likely continuously exposed to that abuse. So we launched in January.
We did. We launched several iterations later. Where were we at? And this is what the screen looks like at this point for desktop, at least. I'll point this out too, and you hit on this a second ago. But this documents. Go back a second.
I don't know how.
Okay, so for the document side, There's a ton of documentation that happens when you go through a divorce like this, obviously, like thousands of pages. Text messages are really common. You need to go through, 10 years worth of text messages to understand what's going on. And that's an AI application, right? So we're able to upload documents if you're a premium subscriber, journal entries, being able to create documentation, what's going on. A guy shows up drunk to pick up the kids, things like that. You can add that to the site. So there's a number of premium features, particularly for people who are later on in that cycle of violence, like toward the end of that. And the idea is to build a business around this. And that's this big, gigantic balloon that is able to lift up our ability to impact social good, that kind of thing.
Yes,
people seem to like it.
Okay, now I can do it.
Okay. There you go. So almost immediately we started getting comments back on a post-hoc survey that we had. And at this point, it's about once a day Ann and I get a nice little pat on the back, which it's really lovely, honestly. And some of them are quite emotional. They're kind of hard to read a little bit at times, but it's interesting how people just need to be heard, and people need an objective voice, and they need to be able to talk about these things without jeopardizing their other relationships, and to be able to present this to someone and have them be validated for the first time in their life has been an incredible user experience, and it's been really rewarding for us too.
It is incredibly difficult and scary for people to talk about their experience as a victim, because others inadvertently will invalidate them or just say the wrong thing. And we hear from Aimee users all the time, I told Aimee something I haven't told my therapist. I told Aimee things that I haven't told my current partner. Talking about such a vulnerable experience is really, really hard for people. And as it turns out, that we kind of thought that was going to be a problem with AI, that people were going to be like, I don't want to tell AI that. But it's actually the opposite. Yeah. They are able to talk about and process things that they would not otherwise. And there are many of them.
This is a really interesting map for us. Mm-hmm. So first of all, on the right-hand side, that's our traffic. That's the number of chat messages being sent. It's just been that hockey stick growth that I think everyone looks for. Number of users does the same thing. Number of subscribers does the same thing. So at this point, we're pacing to get some really big numbers over the next year, and hopefully we're able to do that. And then I really love this chart. We thought it's an English-only app. It's a web app, so it's Americans who go to it. But it turns out that people around the world are going through similar situations. And so we'll see, in the afternoon in Denver, there's someone from Iran who's hitting the website and having a conversation with Aimee, or from one of these other countries where women don't have quite the same rights as they have here. And that's really exciting, because you think about who those people are. Like, are they a child bride? They're hiding from someone if they're doing this at 2 a.m. And it gets you up in the morning to go work on this.
Mm-hmm. But 95 countries, entirely organic. There has been no paid advertising. Last month, 84,000 messages were submitted to Aimee, and we have a 1-to-1 response rate. So that means 84 messages went back. And as a volume comparison, the domestic violence hotline is the largest DV direct support organization in the United States. And over the last 30 days annualized, we did about 62% of their contact volume. They get about $25 million from the government annually to run their program.
So that's that cup of coffee we had. How do we create more leverage so we can impact more people? That's how we do it. So in terms of technology, a lot of people are engineers here. It's interesting area. Obviously we're using artificial intelligence, and I'm kind of immersed in this on a day-to-day basis. I'm used to being in my garage and not in front of all of you, but that's okay. So on the back end, what we're working on for a release that'll come out in the next few weeks, hopefully, is this knowledge graph approach that kind of sets us up for more of an agentic kind of idea. But we're taking in interesting information from users, from their chat sessions, from the journal entries, from the documents they upload, and from my story, which is like a profile that they fill out. And what we built and will soon release is a technology that looks through all of that and builds this knowledge graph, this knowledge base that is an understanding of all the facts, all of the edges, all the points that Aimee knows about a person. And what that allows us to do is to start injecting that into some of the prompts and have her give more proactive and more knowledgeable responses. So a couple of examples there. So did your ex say anything to you at the soccer game this past weekend? Maybe this person was messaging or journaling about how they were nervous about a soccer game. It's not an uncommon situation. Elizabeth really liked watching Home Alone last year. That might be a fun way to bond this weekend. Jimmy may have violated the court's orders. You might want to speak with your attorney. Jimmy would be the abusive spouse in this case. So I guess having a knowledge graph gives us an ability to be much more accurate in our responses. It creates this kind of like a guardian angel that watches over all the things that are going on and all the massive amounts of documentation that gets generated when you have a case like this. And I think it also gets us a little more proactive in meeting the person where they're at. We have 2 minutes. We gotta go quick.
I saw that. Okay.
So where we're headed from here, I really like this idea of this is what does Aimee sound like? Like what you've seen so far is text-based, that's it. And we're getting emotional. We're getting like people crying, like they're interacting with us and being validated. They're being emotional when they read this. Well, what if Aimee looks like you? What if she sounds like you, or sounds like someone else, or whatever you want it to sound like? Like that's a place we want to go with this. We also want her to be available everywhere. So right now we're just a web app. You go to a website to find us. The web is generally available, but how about WhatsApp? How about Messenger, TikTok? Do we need to be on Bumble? All the other dating apps that are out there? I think we need to be involved with all of that in order to make sure that we're preventing abuse as much as possible too.
Yeah, that's one of the unique things. We have the ability to prevent a future of abuse through early intervention. We're currently working on products that will serve those totally overwhelmed nonprofit organizations and some of the entirely unmet victim service needs at like the government level. Imagine in a criminal court situation, the kind of support that the survivor needs. And then also in the workplace, because like we discussed, about a third of the cost is being borne by employers, and they have the opportunity to play a significant role in helping prevent that abuse, providing necessary resources, and expediting recovery.
Where are we going? So right now we're pacing to help about 1 million people in 2025 if growth continues the way that we think that it will. And that's for 2 of us so far. Although we'll have to grow to hit 1 million people because the OpenAI costs will eat us alive.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's a huge opportunity here, so we'd love to be a much larger organization.
Yeah.
We're also looking at 30 million visitors a year. We'll be far and away the largest domestic violence organization in the country, or arguably in the world. And then I really love this idea of someone out there living under an oppressive regime or culture, getting access to Aimee to be able to plan for their safety and their children's safety, and move on. Yeah. That's us. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
WPS is an international nonprofit whose mission is to help save endangered species and ecosystems. And the company's AI-assisted systems are a key element in helping it achieve its goals. Matt Hron and Matt Morrissette will discuss the mission of WPS, its challenges and successes, and their impact on the world. Thank you both so much. Thank you for being here.
No.
So just going to start with a little video showing a bit of what we do.
My name is Eric Schmidt, Executive Director of Wildlife Protection Solutions, and we are here at Camp Katambe in the center of the Lesur ecosystem on the island of Sumatra. There are 2.6 million hectares of old-growth primary forest here, and it's the only place on Earth where elephants, Sumatran rhinos, tigers, and orangutans coexist in the wild.
On this trip, the big challenge is going to be to install cameras on the pathways that poachers are using, so we can monitor their entry and exit points in real time to protect the core habitat of the Sumatran rhinos, tigers, elephants, and orangutans.
He's been with the RPUs for 20 years. On patrols, this man has seen 5 Sumatran rhino in all of that time. Gives you some idea of how rare they are.
We're setting up trap cameras that will take an image, take a picture of anything, any movement that they see, which would be the loggers, the poachers, anybody going into or exiting out of these pathways, and then transmit it in real time so you can actually look at it in a cell phone app. And we help them from our headquarters in Denver monitor these feeds of pictures coming in so that whenever human activity is detected, they can actually send their rangers out to intervene and stop it before it results in a dead animal.
Local rangers, conservationists, and communities use our WPS Watch technology to monitor poaching and illegal wildlife activities on several continents. And we've also created a global volunteer network where anyone can join online via our app to watch the data streams in real time from around the world, helping us to prevent wildlife crimes by being the first responders and letting us know when they see something illegal happening. Our goal is to install thousands of cameras in protected areas all over the world, to empower local rangers and enroll thousands of volunteers to help monitor areas where endangered species are being threatened.
So a little bit about Wildlife Protection Solutions, or WPS as we're often called. We are a global organization. So we work with partners around the world. Often these are NGOs, private reserves, government agencies, people doing the on-the-ground conservation work all over the world. We are a nonprofit. So all the work we do, the services and products we provide to those partners free of charge. So that's a big part of what we do. And we've been doing this for just over 10 years now. We're based nearby in Golden. We have some staff around the US as well as field staff in South Africa and Indonesia. So the mission of WPS is to use technology for the conservation of endangered species and ecosystems. So a bit about our overall impact. That video I showed was from several years ago, and talking about our goal of having thousands of cameras, and that's exactly what we've done. So we have projects in at least 48 countries now with over 2,800 cameras sending us information real time around the world. And from those cameras, we're processing more than 50,000 photos every day with AI. So actually in that video, AI wasn't even part of it. We were just looking at those photos manually. Now we're automatically processing every single one of those that comes in and getting important information about what's in those photos. And with this system, we've been able to detect thousands of illegal intrusions and potential poachers across protected areas. So a bit about why this is important. You all likely know that we are in the midst of a biodiversity crisis. The current loss of biodiversity is being described as the sixth mass extinction. So actually this dramatic decline is on par with what happened when the dinosaurs went extinct in the fifth mass extinction. So right now the species are going right at 1 to 10,000 times the background rate. We're losing over 200 to 2,000 species every year right now. Just here you can see in the last 50 or so years, more than half of wildlife populations have been lost. So this is important work that we need to do and focus on technology solutions to really help in this area. And I think a lot of people don't know necessarily what we're talking about when we say conservation technology. A lot of this, like many other things, revolves around data and being able to understand what is happening on the ground so you can then use that information to take appropriate actions. So a lot of technologies like the camera traps we use are involved in real-time monitoring and data collection. So that can be camera traps, GPS tags or collars on animals, acoustic sensors that can do audio recordings remotely, or even satellite data that can tell you when there's deforestation or fire in an area. We take all that data, and there are a lot of tools used to manage and analyze that data, gain insights, and help manage a protected area, as well as ways to share that information with the community so you can have that impact on the ground. The benefits here are these types of tools give us automatic, continuous data collection. You think about a lot of these things where you're trying to understand what's happening with wildlife on the ground. It takes a lot of effort for someone to do that without these kind of technologies. And we can get that information in real time that can drive an immediate operational response. We've seen this really act as a force multiplier. So we work with areas around the world that typically have very limited resources, limited staff capacity, money, infrastructure. And something like a camera trap that you have deployed 5 kilometers away can save a lot of staff effort in manually trying to patrol that area. So these are just some of the technology solutions that we focus on at WPS, and a couple of them today I'm going to focus on are WPS Watch, which was what was featured in the video for our real-time monitoring, as well as Achille, which is sort of a partner application focused more on the larger surveys. So just walking a bit through how our WPS Watch application works. It all starts with some sort of camera sensor that we'll have deployed remotely in a protected area. Often that's just an off-the-shelf camera trap, but we can work with a variety of cameras, but basically anything that can send us an email when there's some sort of activity. From those cameras, we then rely on some sort of connectivity solution. This is a big part of our work in the field as well, is in these remote areas, there's often limited infrastructures. How do we get that information from the field to our web platform? Often that's using the existing cellular network, but often using things like Wi-Fi, point-to-point radio, other communications technologies, so we can get that information as close to real time as possible. And that all gets sent to our WPS Watch web platform, which is where we use AI to automatically analyze what's in those images. And I'll talk more about the different AI tools we use, but can detect things like people, which in the wrong place at the wrong time can be a threat to wildlife that we want to know about immediately. Things like animals are all often very important, just in terms of knowing what's going on, but knowing the impacts they can have as they interact with people. So based on what's detected in those images by the AI, we can then automatically send messages to the people that know about it, that need to know about it. So that can be a WhatsApp, a text message, email. Often that's going directly to the security staff on the ground that need to have that information right away and be able to respond to it immediately. Also have the ability to send that to an operations center where someone might be monitoring across a reserve or multiple reserves, where they can see information coming from dozens or hundreds of cameras at a time. We also have the ability to share that information with our volunteers. So we've cultivated a group of thousands of volunteers over the years, people like you in this room that have the ability to access this information just on your phone or computer and help us monitor for those wildlife threats. Because while we have the alerting and everything automatically built in there, having some eyes on the problem can help us escalate things even quicker and prevent issues from arising. So a bit about what we're doing specifically with AI in this area. A few different applications we're doing. The main one for object detection is an AI model referred to as megadetector. So this is sort of a standard across wildlife conservation computer vision that is very good at object detection, specifically just the simple task of looking for animals, people, and vehicles. So those people and vehicle detection are essential to our operations for detecting those wildlife threats, and they work very well for us because we provided a lot of the training data for that. Also, the being able to detect animals then gets into sort of the second phase of our AI analytics, which is species classification. So this is an area we've dabbled in a bit, training our own AI models for different purposes. So often we do this on a regional or project basis, creating specific AI models to classify the species in that region. One thing we've been using a bit over the past year or two here is looking at how we can leverage multimodal LLMs to get more information from the photos, not just the discrete species or what's detected, but more information to help us understand what's going on and possibly prompt other decisions. Some simple applications we've looked at is simply being able to get information on what is the current level in the watering hole that we're monitoring, so we can send alerts when someone needs to go maintain that. Another common application in this area is individual ID. So not just being able to say this is a rhino, but this is rhino 1, 2, 3, 4, and that being an important part of managing things like rhinos is knowing where they are they healthy, what their situation is. But also if you're trying to understand the wildlife in an area, if you have a rhino detected at 5 cameras, do you have 5 rhinos or the same rhino 5 times? So being able to detect individuals allows you to actually count how many of a given species you have in an area. Also commonly used for determining activity patterns, health of animals, as well as a big challenge that AI is trying to help with is distance sampling for cameras, being able to tell how far what was detected is from the camera, so that you can then take that into account for detecting the probability of detection and estimating populations. So just running through a few use cases that we use this technology for. The primary thing that what WPS Watch was created for was this security and anti-poaching aspect. So being able to detect poaching and illegal intrusions in protected areas, prompt the response before an animal is killed, and hopefully also get an arrest out of it and prevent further poaching. Brief example of this in action. So this is a protected area in South Africa that we work closely with. As you can see, there's a fairly dense populated area just across the road from this private reserve. And this reserve has rhino in it, so that it's a big target for poaching and human impacts in this area. So as part of our assessment, this nice road crossing the river here seems like a logical entry point that we'd want to be targeting to monitor. And sure enough, shortly after we put cameras in there, detected these 2 individuals coming in. These are the scouts that often go ahead into a protected area to find where the rhinos are, so that they can then call the next person, which is the shooter that can come in and shoot the rhino. So this was all detected on WPS Watch and actually seen by one of our volunteers in Colorado. Was the first person to see these images, who contacted us, and we followed our protocols to contact the wardens at this reserve in South Africa, which triggered the anti-poaching unit response, which we happened to catch on camera as well. There was a firefight. Fortunately, no one was injured or killed, but caused them to drop their weapon and flee. And we actually were able to see some of the crime scene investigation afterwards on the camera. So this is the kind of success that we're seeing every day with this system, being able to get the people on the ground that can make an impact to have that information as quickly as possible. Another important application is human-wildlife conflict or interaction mitigation. So with being able to detect when a certain animal is nearby, we can also use this to trigger a system that might deter that animal. So we have a system we've been piloting over the past year that basically can trigger any electronic device, whether that's loud sounds or flashing lights or recording of people talking, something that might deter the animal from coming into a particular area. So something we can use with elephants in Africa, but also for a more local example, something we're looking at with wolves in Colorado and other places. I'm going to just go through these quickly so we can get to some important additional information here. Invasive species monitoring. So invasive species are a huge threat to wildlife. So being able to detect them when they're still in a place where they're supposed to be eradicated and really help with those efforts. I think I'm going to skip through these. You can see the rest of these here, but I want to make sure Matt gets a chance to talk here. So I mentioned earlier Achille. This is a similar tool while WPS Watch focuses on that real-time information. This focuses on the challenge of larger surveys. So someone trying to understand the biodiversity in an area might set out a couple hundred camera traps for a period of a couple years. And with that, you're collecting possibly millions of photos. And the challenge is, how do you take those millions of photos and convert that to actionable data that you can then use to drive your management decisions? So we're doing a similar application of AI there to use those computer vision models to analyze those photos, save countless person hours of manually reviewing and cataloging them. That can then give us those biodiversity metrics such as occupancy, abundance, distribution. And those are the key things that people are making decisions on that drive wildlife management. As part of this, we're going to have a AI model zoo that will include models from a variety of conservation and technology partners that users can browse and find models and try them out with their data to find the ones that best meet their needs. And this will also feed back to those model providers, giving them feedback on the performance and directly providing them training data as well. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Morrissette here.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we've been kind of given is that obviously in conservation, the charitable donations fall far short to what the problem actually is. And so one of the things we've been challenged with is to use AI to maximize the efficiency across the organization and then act as leaders to the rest of the conservation community and hopefully show those lessons learned. So some of the areas that we're looking at are software development. We use AI for code completion, testing, and security applications as well. Such as I cannot tell you how useful Application Insights is for monitoring our Azure web application across the board. So I'm really rushing. So, and then some of the stuff we're also doing is the agents subgroup. We're using agents to help with things emails and that sort of thing, but grant writing, that's a very arduous task that is often very repetitive. And so those are some of the areas that we're starting to look at there. Also, we're looking at creating a data repository for all of our information and just seeing what kind of unique insights we can get across all the documentation we have. Help desk for WPS Watch and Achille in the field to be able to how do you deploy a camera and those kinds of things. So that was really quick to kind of go through those last couple slides, and then some information about how you can help and a little QR code